Today, we are going to look at quantity survey of load-bearing structures. We have already completed the part up to plinth. So today we are going to look at the superstructure. And as I told you earlier, that when you do quantity surveying, you have to follow the same sequence that is followed while the actual construction takes place. So the first activity that happens after the plinth is completed is construction of walls. Now I'm assuming that we are using brickwork here, but one could use UCR masonry for walls, or one could also use block work. So whatever the material, walls are the first item of construction that is taken up. Now, while we construct walls, it must be understood that walls can be of various types in terms of their thicknesses. Certain walls may be thicker, certain walls may be thinner. Then they would also differ in terms of the materials used for the construction. So for every item of construction with different materials or different thicknesses, the quantities will have to be worked out separately. For instance, if you have 200 mm thick brickwork, then it is a separate item. And if you have a 300 mm thick brickwork, it is a separate item of construction. Second important thing is what is the mode of measurement for walls or brickwork or block work. In superstructure, it is in area or in square meters. So what we have to do is calculate the surface area of the walls and not the volume. Below plinth, all masonry was measured and calculated, and the quantities were found out in cubic content. But in the superstructure, it is not the cubic content, but the area. So it is calculated in square meters. Okay. Now, having said this, there are three ways in which the floor plans could be dimensioned. One would be the centerline method, which we already know, which we have already used in the plinth calculations. The second method could be face line. That means instead of giving the center line of the wall, the dimensions start from one face of the wall. This is a practice which is followed for maybe only ground floor structures. Because if you have a tall structure, then the person doing masonry will not be able to tie the line for the face of a wall while construction on the outside. It will have to be on the inside, because if you're on an upper floor and if you're constructing a wall, then the wall, while constructing, the mason will have to tie the line on the inside face and not the outside face. And usually when you do face line dimensions, you start with one end with the external face line, and then every face line of the wall which is in that direction only is given. So it's like very similar to center line dimension, but it is not the center, but one face of the wall. This was done earlier so that it allowed the masons to quickly tie the line for construction of the masonry. But it's not a very good method when it comes to taller buildings. Even in ground and one upper building, it becomes difficult. And the third method is wall-to-wall measurements. That means both the sides of the wall are dimensioned and the distance between two walls is dimensioned. A hybrid, which is more commonly used, is where centerline dimensions of walls is given on the outside, and inside the wall-to-wall dimension is given. This is also a good method. This is more frequently followed. So I just gave you the information about dimensioning, because when you find out the quantities for walls, what you will have to do is calculate the length of walls and the height of walls. Width is something that you will not calculate. So how do you calculate lengths of various walls? If its centerline dimensions are given, then we will follow the long wall, short wall method. Very easy. You have already done it. Or sometimes if the internal wall to wall distances are given, then you can use the long wall, short wall method. But here you don't use the center line to calculate the length of the long wall, but you add the thicknesses of walls on either end to the inside dimension to get the long wall, and short walls are calculated as what is already given on the drawing. So it's a fairly simple method. I don't think I'll dwell more on that. How do you calculate the height? That is the question now. In sections for superstructure, you always give height from unfinished floor to unfinished floor. That means floor height is given from slab top to slab top. You don't take the tiles into consideration, obviously, because different floors may have different kinds of tile thicknesses. So the dimension given in the section is floor to floor. Okay, floor top to floor top. And then if it's a flat roof, even though it's a load bearing construction, you may be using a ring of beams on top of every wall and then the slab sitting on it. Why don't we put the slab directly on the wall? To ensure that if we provide a beam, the beam will ensure that the load transfer happens in a very uniform manner on the wall. So there will always be a beam on top of the wall, and then the slab will rest on that beam, RCC beam. So here what you'll have to do is, while calculating the height of the wall, you will take the floor to floor height and deduct the depth of the beam. Okay. And that will give you the height of the brickwork or block work or masonry work that is going to happen on the floor. So you have the lengths and you have the heights, multiply them and you will get the quantity of walls. But is that all? No, because there are openings in the wall. There will be doors and windows, and there will be no masonry where you will fix the door and the window. So what you will have to do is you'll have to have a separate set called deductions. And in these deductions, what will you deduct? First, you will deduct all the doors. You will then deduct all the window areas. So door areas, window areas. Is that all? No. Because when you have doors and windows, you will also have lintels on top of doors and windows. They will be in concrete, RCC. So you will have to also deduct the quantity for the lintels. Now calculating quantities for deduction for doors and windows is simple, because you already have a schedule which gives you all the doors and windows with their names, and you can count the numbers and simply deduct them. But when it comes to lintels, it is not so easy. First of all, many people forget that when you deduct the quantity for lintel, it is in area and it is not a cubic content. So which area will you take? Area that you see on the wall. So it is the length of the lintel and the height of the lintel. Once again, the breadth of the lintel is not to be considered for deductions. Now, how do you calculate the length of the lintel? That's the next question. Very easy. You have the size of the opening on which the lintel is sitting. Add the bearing required. For instance, usually the bearing is 150 mm. So if the window is, let's say, 900 mm, then 150 on one side, 150 on the other side. So your lintel length will be 900 plus 150, 1 plus 150, that is 1200. Now this also actually on a spreadsheet, it is very simple, because what you can simply do is copy paste from the lengths from the door window schedule or the door window quantities and just add 0.32 the length everywhere. But wait, that's not all. Because sometimes your door or window may be in a corner, just touching the wall. In that case, what will happen? Let us say that the wall thickness there is 230 mm, and you have a door or a window which is flush with the wall. Then the lintel bearing on the wall at the corner cannot be 150. It will have to be 230. Because how will you construct that little bit of 80, 90 mm of wall? Not possible. Okay. So sometimes the lintel lengths have to be longer or the bearing has to be more than 150. For this, you have to actually look at the plan carefully to see where the lintels will be bigger. All right. Any case, I always say that using computers and spreadsheet has made our life much easier, because now many times, at least what I do is that even though the walls is the earlier item, I always calculate door window quantities and quantities of lintels before I start doing the walls. Because if I have done that already, then I can do a quick copy paste. Alternatively, you can also do the deductions for doors and windows and lintels. And when you are calculating the quantities for doors and windows, you can copy paste from the deduction part and directly into your item. Okay. So coming back to walls, you have to deduct the door areas, window areas, and areas of the lintel as you see, the surface area of lintel as you see on the wall. Also, sometimes in certain good quality construction, we provide sills, window sills, which are again concrete bands just below the window. So dependent on whether you are providing it or not, if you are providing, you will have to calculate the sill surface area also to be deducted from the wall. So this is what you do for walls. Now, sometimes you may not have a flat roof, but you may have a sloping roof. Let's say you have Mangalore tile roof. Then what do you do? Very simple. The the eaves end and the other end, the heights will be different. So there you can calculate from the section the heights of those two walls. And for the gable ends, where the top is slanting, what do? You calculate the average height. So there you will have to take the first height and the second height and average it out. And the height that you use for gable walls is the average height in case of sloping roofs. So this is how you calculate heights of walls. And that is the end of our first item of construction for quantities. The next item obviously is doors. And I have already talked about how doors are calculated. Now here again, I will say that it makes sense to calculate quantities of internal doors and external doors separately. I will tell you later why we have to calculate them separately. Okay. But if you have different types of doors, for instance, you may have a panel door and you may have flush doors, or sometimes the toilet doors are designed differently. So if you have different types of doors, then the quantities will have to be calculated separately because they will be separate items of construction. Okay. Similarly, for windows, if you have different types of windows, I'm not referring to the sizes of windows, but the types of windows. For instance, you have a sliding window, or you have a casement window, or you have a lowered window. The rates for these will be different. And therefore, the quantities of different types of windows will have to be calculated separately as separate items of construction. After windows, the next item that you will calculate is lintels. I have already talked to you about how you calculate the length of the lintel, especially when it is near a corner. So you'll have to look at every situation where a lintel sits carefully and then decide what is the length that you will use. Lintel quantities are calculated as cubic content. So there you will not calculate only, you will also use the width of the wall on which the lintel sits as the third dimension and calculate the cost of lintels. Then the next item is the RCC beams and slabs which sit if it's a flat roof on top. Now, if it's a flat roof, let us not forget that we may also have a parapet on top at the terrace. Now, that parapet height will have to be taken into consideration, and a separate quantity for masonry, brickwork, blockwork will have to add it to the walls, where you will take the length of the parapet. It could be the entire periphery of the building, and the best way of calculating that is using the center line method. So you just add all center lines and you will get the length of the parapet wall. Height of the parapet wall is given in this section. Don't forget to deduct the height of the coping. For instance, if the parapet wall shows as is shown as 900 and there is a 150 mm coping on top, then the blockwork or brickwork or masonry would be only 750 and not 900. This is added to the wall. Now coming back to beams and slabs. Slabs are quantity calculated as area in square meters. So what you do is that you look at the plan, and whatever is the slab area in plan, that is calculated by multiplying length into breadth. If you have slabs of different thicknesses, then they are calculated as separate items of construction. So if you have 100 mm thick slab and 120 mm thick slab and 150 mm thick slab, all these will have to be calculated as separate items of construction. How do you calculate beams? You see, there is a junction between the beams and the slabs. So even though the schedule for beam may give the depth and the width of the beam, we will not use that depth. We will take the total depth of the beam and deduct the thickness of the slab that sits on the beam, because that you have already calculated when you calculated the area of slab. Okay, so that much portion, the thickness of the slab, is deducted from the beam, and what remains is only calculated as a quantity. Here you will need to calculate the lengths of all the beams, but it's a very simple exercise because the lengths can be directly copied from the lengths of walls. We have already calculated the lengths of all walls, and beams are going to sit on top of the walls. So whatever is the length of the wall under the beam will become the length of the beam itself. Very simple. Okay, so this is how you calculate beams and slabs. Now what about sloping roofs? Suppose you have, as I said, let's say sheeting or Mangalore tile roof. So what do? Do you calculate the little things that go up to make the roof, the joists and the battens on which the Mangalore tiles sit? No. Our life is much easier here while we are doing quantity surveying, because what you do is simply calculate the surface area of roof. So when you calculate the roof, many people make the mistake of simply taking the dimensions from plan, and they go wrong, because you know that the roof is in a slope. So the width of the roof you may obtain from the plan, but when you are looking at the length of the roof, that means from the ridge down to the eaves, that is to be taken from the section, because in the section only you will get the correct length, right? I hope you understand what I'm saying. Also, don't forget that most sloping roofs will extend as in form of a overhang beyond the wall, bottom wall. Okay, so when you calculate the roof length, look at the section and don't forget to include the overhang. And then it is a fairly simple calculation, because roofs are counted as square quantity or area. Obviously, when you calculate the rate for roofs, it becomes a little more difficult, because there you have to take into account all the paraphernalia that goes with making of the roof, the joists or spars as they're called, or and if you have some kind of, you may have to tie up the tiles with walls with wires, etc. So all that The cost of all that and the labor for doing all that is included while doing the rate analysis. But here we just have to calculate the area. So fairly simple. Next important item is plaster. You may have two kinds of plasters, internal and external. And even within these, there are various types of plasters. So once again, if you calculate plasters, and if you have different types of plasters, they will all have to be calculated as separate rates, separate items of construction and with separate rates. So let's first look at the internal plaster. How do you calculate internal plaster? First thing that you do, if it's a flat roof, calculate the ceiling, which is the room size. So you have to calculate internal plaster quantities room by room. Okay, you take up a room, first quantity that you calculate is the ceiling plaster, which is the size of the room. If the room is say 3 meters by 4 meters, then it is just 3 into 4. And then you have 4 walls. How do you calculate that? You look at the ceiling. You have 2 dimensions there already, 3 and 4, because the room is 3 by 4. So you'll have 2 walls which will be 3 meter long and 2 walls which will be 4 meter long. So just by taking the dimensions that you have put into calculation of the ceiling area, you can derive the lengths of all the 4 walls of the room very easily. When it comes to height, here you know that you have the floor to floor height. Now when you have floor to floor height, what do you need to deduct? Just the thickness of the slab. So you do not look at the floor top to the bottom of the ceiling height, but you look at the floor to floor height, unfinished floor to unfinished floor height, which is given, and deduct the thickness of the slab from that height to get the height of plaster in the rooms for the walls. Length we have already got. Height is floor finish to floor, unfinished floor to unfinished floor distance minus the thickness of the slab. Okay. Sometimes we will have skirting at the bottom. So the next question is, do you deduct that little strip of plaster at the bottom? The answer is no, you don't. Because you do not know up to exactly what height the skirting is going to be given. So what you normally do is plaster, while doing internal plaster, you plaster the wall right up to the floor. You don't stop a little above the floor or don't leave room for the skirting. In any case, you'll have to do the backup, the backing coat or the first coat of plaster even before applying the skirting. So that is the internal plaster. But again, the openings, there are doors and windows. So you'll have to deduct the area for doors and windows from the internal plaster, but not the lintels, because the plaster will go on top of lintels. It will not go on the door and on the window. So what you do is deduct the areas for doors and windows from plaster. But then there are jambs. There are door jambs and window jambs, and there are all those corners, and they also need to be plastered. So are you going to calculate the area of the jambs separately? And making the corner requires a little more cement and a little more labor. So what do you do with that? The answer is very simple. You do not calculate the area of jamb and add it. Neither do you take into account the corners for the jambs. What you simply do is, instead of deducting door window areas to the full, we deduct only half of those areas, 50%. So if let's say a window is 900 by 1.2, so the total area would be 1.08 square meters, but you will not deduct 1.08 square meters, but you will only deduct half of that, that is 0.54 square meters, because the other half that you are not deducting is going to take care of the jambs and the corners. So once again, calculation of our deductions for openings, doors and windows is not so difficult. You just have to take the areas from the statement or the schedule that you have or the items that you have calculated, and you can directly deduct half of that. Now here the very important question. You remember I said that when you are calculating deductions for, when you are calculating areas for doors, you should calculate them separately for internal and external walls. Simply because all windows are always on the external surface, external walls. Okay. So you can directly deduct half of the windows, no problem. Doors, external doors, you can deduct for half, 50%, because it's an external wall. But when a door exists on an internal wall between two rooms, let's say room 1 and room 2, then half of the door, internal door, will be deducted in the plaster quantity of room 1, and half of it will be deducted from plaster quantity of room 2. So instead of doing all that, what we do is, if you have calculated internal and external doors separately, you always, while deducting plaster quantities for openings, you deduct all external windows, which are always external actually, windows and external doors at 50%, and internal doors you deduct twice at 50% or once at full area. Okay, that's why I was saying that you should calculate internal and external door quantities separately. So this is how you calculate the plaster quantity internally. What about external plaster? External plaster, again, you will have to calculate the length of the periphery from the outside. Okay, that is not really a very difficult job, because you have the drawing and you can simply go on adding all the little offsets, etc., and get the periphery. And nowadays, there is a better alternative also to counter check whether your periphery is right, because what you can do is just draw a polyline all around your building. It will do the building profile and it will tell you the exact length, and you can tally it. When it comes to calculating the height, this is where the interesting things starts happening. What all things will you add in the height of the external plaster? First of all, the height of the plinth. Very simple. Floor heights, you all have unfinished floor to unfinished floor heights are there. Then on top of that, there will be a parapet. So you add that height, and this will give you the total height. But you don't stop there. There's a common practice is to add another 150 mm to this height. Why? Why do we do it? Because the ground can be uneven, and the purpose of the external plaster is to protect the masonry. So what do? The plaster many times goes a little bit inside the earth, inside the ground level. It doesn't start above ground, but it is done a little below the ground level. For that, you remove a little bit of earth, and the plaster is done for at least 150 mm below ground line. Okay, so that you have to add for the external plaster height. Then what do? There's the top of the parapet, the entire length of the parapet. There will be a top area which will have to be included in external plaster. So how do you do that? You have the periphery of the you have the centerline dimension of the parapet, which you have already calculated. Use that as the length, and width is wall width plus 40 mm. Now where does this 40 mm come from? Simply because your external plaster thickness is about 18 or 19 mm. So 18 or 19 mm on either side is about 38, right? 38 mm. So you don't take 36 or 38 mm, but you take 40 mm. So if your wall width is 200 mm, then your top strip of the parapet wall plaster will be 200 plus 40, that is 240. If it is 230 mm wall thickness, then it will become 230 plus 40, 270 mm, and not the wall thickness. Many people add that little mm to the width, but it does make a big difference because the quantities can be actually quite large when you really do them. Then there is one more thing added to the external plaster, that is the inside surface of the parapet. This is also external plaster. So what do? Once again, very simply, calculate the internal periphery of the parapet wall. Height, full height. Even though the little lower part of the parapet wall plaster may later be covered by the waterproofing that you do to the terrace. All right. So if the parapet wall is shown as 900 mm, including coping, then the internal, the height for the internal patch of plaster around the internal periphery of the parapet wall will be the complete 900. Okay. Of course, you have staircases, etc., etc. So those surface areas, I'm not going to talk about it. They will have to be included in the external plaster. Then we come to few other items which we have still not calculated the quantities of. One of them is the staircase. Now the staircase will be finished in different kinds of finishes. The trade may have something, the risers may be finished, the soffit may be finished, there will be a railing with a handrail on top. So all this is there. How do you calculate how the quantities for this? Very simple. Staircases are counted as numbers of steps. Okay, so it's a quantity which gives numbers. Now, when you make working drawing plans, you know that you always put those numbers. The first riser, after the first riser, you have the first trade that is given number 1. And then you number all your steps in the staircase. So those number of staircases are calculated as steps. And then if you have a mid landing, the mid landing is calculated as 2 steps. And if you have a quarter landing, it is calculated as 1 step. So you have just the number of steps. Calculation of quantities for staircases or steps is very simple. What is difficult is calculating the rate, because there you have to take into account all that I talked about: finishing, tiles, plaster, paint, balustrades, and railing, everything. Okay. Obviously, if you have staircases of different widths, they will be calculated as separate items of construction. You may have a 1 meter wide staircase, and you may have a 1.5 meter wide staircase, and somewhere you may have a 2 meter wide staircase. So these will be calculated as separate items of construction. All right. Then after that, there are lofts on top of toilets or in the kitchen also sometimes. So they have to be calculated as area, just like the slab. Many times their rate includes the finishing also. So you don't calculate the finishing to those lofts, etc., in the cluster area, etc., because they are included in the rate of that item. There will be weather shades or chhajas outside, and there will be pardis also. So weather shades or chhajas are horizontal elements, pardis are vertical elements. They are also calculated as areas. Surface area is calculated. And here the rule is that when you calculate the overhang or the pardi or the weather shade, it is calculated from the face of the wall. So the lintel is calculated completely, then, and that is in cubic content, but the weather shade which is extending beyond the wall is calculated as an area, and pardis are calculated minus the thickness of the weather shades. Okay, when you calculate the height of the pardi, you deduct the height of the weather shade to which the pardi is attached. So this is how you calculate pardis. Then there is coping on top of the parapet wall. How do you calculate that? That is calculated as length. Again, you don't have to do a lot of calculations. You can simply take that length from the quantity that you have calculated for the wall. Or the okay, because it is going to be the same length, and it is only running meters. So you don't have to multiply by width and height or anything. That more or less covers. Oh yes, yeah. There is this dado. You know, for the toilets in bathrooms, WCs, etc., you have dado. Even in kitchen, you have a lot of dado. So dado again is calculated as surface area. You can calculate that, and also that has to be deducted from the plaster area. Now there's only one thing that we left out as of now, and that is flooring. Now one could use different kinds of flooring. In the living room you may have marble, and in the bedroom you may have, I don't know, some other kind of tiles, maybe wooden tiles or something. So different types of flooring may be used. So we have to calculate different types of flooring as different items of construction. Again, calculation is fairly simple. You can go to that room. It is calculated room by room. So if you're calculating flooring area for living room, you look at the living room ceiling dimensions. They will be the same as flooring dimensions. Now that is simple, but what one has to really look at is what happens to the doors. Between two rooms, there will always be a door, and that door will have a jamb. So that little strip of flooring, which is equal to the width of the door and the width of the wall in which the door is sitting. For instance, if the wall is, let's say, 230 mm, it's a flooring between, it's a door between living room and bedroom. Okay, you don't have a direct access like that from living to bedroom, but let's assume that you have a a door like that. So, and let's say that the living room has a different flooring and bedroom has a different flooring. So to which flooring quantity do you add the jamb? And once again, the answer is very simple. You always add the quantity of door jamb to that flooring which is more expensive. Okay. If you have, let's say, granite in the living room and some other tiles in the room adjacent, obviously granite is more expensive. So you will have to let the granite will have to go right up to the other edge of the room, the beginning of the other room to which it is connected. So the jamb will be in granite. Okay. So this is how you do the flooring jamb addition. Now sometimes there will be a tile drop. When there is a tile drop, then the flooring of the lower floor always is included in the jamb. Why? Because that's where the door opens, right? So you cannot have just a strip of another flooring, which will look very odd. Okay. Sometimes they also use a completely different flooring for all jambs, just to differentiate. But that is a design element, that is up to you. So that's how you do the flooring calculations. So this is what it is all about.